Good evening. Welcome to Going Solo Life After Divorce. This is your co-host EZE, and to my left is Cece.
Yes, Cece, welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us again this evening. We always want to start off by giving a great big shout out to Talk What Studios, Talk What Networks, for allowing us to be on the air with you this evening and bringing you some informative information for our listeners out there. We always want to thank you for getting in touch with us, asking us your questions, and providing feedback to our show. So we really appreciate that.
Yeah, tonight we're really going to touch on a few things I think that are really close to our hearts, and one of those is children. And I was doing a little bit of research with regards to that, and it is just so overwhelming what children have to go through with regards to a divorce, splitting of their families, and we have to keep in mind that kids they're not really in the factor. We don't really a lot of times when people are going through divorce, they don't necessarily ask the children their opinion. They just pretty much let the kids know this is what's happening, and then the kids have to deal with it. And some of the research that I found, it said that half of American children will witness a breakup of their parents' marriage. So half of the kids in the United States will
Wow.
experience that. And then close to half of those children will experience another divorce because the second marriage that the parents go through, they won't make that. And so you think what our kids are really the union of a family is so very, very vital, and it's so important to the kids. And when we go through divorce, it really wrecks their world. I mean, it really, really shakes them up. And so tonight with us, I am so very pleased to have Rosalind Sedacca with us. She is an author and also a national award-winning professional speaker. And she really has focused and given her life to helping others to be able to handle this type of thing, because most parents, and I would say probably 99% really do want to have a well-balanced family. They do want their kids to be able to adjust. And she's devoted her life to trying to help others, make parents aware of how they can go about, helping their kids through this tremendous time for them. So welcome to the show, Roz.
Well, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to talk with you.
Great. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get into such a, important line of work?
Yes, if you had asked me 20 years ago what I was going to be doing in the future, I never would have guessed that my entire life's passion would be talking about divorce and parenting issues. But I had a divorce myself when my son was 11. And first I was traumatized by how to break the news to him. I was feeling so guilty and so concerned about not emotionally hurting him. And I stayed up for weeks of sleepless nights thinking about it. And finally, one night, literally at 4 in the morning, I came up with an approach to telling him that I used, and it was very, very successful and ultimately became the genesis for my book, How Do I Tell the Kids About the Divorce? But it was something that I didn't write until more than a decade after this all happened. So I went through the divorce, I went through the co-parenting and raising my son, who is now a grown adult and married. And his father and I were there at all the experiences in life, from the Little League games through the graduations and through the marriage. And we worked out in a very positive way. And I have to say my greatest achievement in life was when my son, when he was a young man, a young grown man, said to me one day, Ma, you and Dad really handled the divorce well. I have so many friends whose families created such trauma for them, and I'm so lucky and grateful to you. And I think that to me was my crowning achievement, because it just validated the sacrifices and the concern and all the effort that I put into giving him the best possible outcome, being a child of divorce. And I think in the end, I was very pleased when he volunteered to write the foreword to my book and talk
Wow.
about his own feelings, the emotions, and his own trauma when he was 11 years old, because he certainly wasn't happy about it. But I did learn that if it's handled right, then everyone in the family can have a better outcome. Divorce itself isn't what scars and wounds children. It's the way parents approach the divorce that does the damage. And I spent the rest of my life focused on helping parents avoid the mistakes that can do serious damage to their children and that can harm them as well, and helping them move on after divorce and to create healthier, more successful relationships.
Yeah, hi, Rosalind. This is EZE, and I went on your website, and the work you're doing is so vast and so greatly beneficial. And as you were talking, and I take my own case in the hand that when you get married, and I didn't marry in my 20s, but I thought I was a mature man, and you never think about divorce. And when divorce comes, that alone is devastating enough. But I think the real issue, nobody ever prepared me. I had nowhere to go to even begin as a man to think about what to say to these kids, let alone I think I shied away from them wanting to see the hurt that I was feeling. I didn't want them
Yes.
to experience my hurt, and so therefore I avoided it. It was fine once I got out of it and I had my own place and they came to visit. But even then, I don't think I ever really dealt with the issue one-on-one. They were young, 13 and 9, I think, and they were young, but I was totally unequipped to deal with it,
Yeah, as so many people are. And the sad part is that there's so much damage that parents do unwittingly. They're not aware of the damage they're doing, and also they feel very justified in doing what they do because they're very often so angry at their ex
Correct,
that
yeah.
they let their emotions and the drama and the anger and the hurt fill them up, and what happens is the children become pawns. They become bystanders. And even more dramatic than that, sometimes the children start parenting their own parents because the parents become so wounded and emotionally distraught that the children have to step up to the plate.
Yeah, good
And
point.
that, of course, robs them of their childhood, which is such a cruel thing to do to our innocent children.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I see it a lot, Roz, because I have the divorce support group, and we have a lot of individuals in there that struggle. And by helping each other and supporting each other, they come on board and they talk about what they're going through. And a lot of times they do talk about, children issues and things. And I try to coach them to say that, just because you're divorced doesn't necessarily mean that your family unit ends. It does not. And you have to still be as supportive to your children as if you were there. But what we are finding more and more is the division of the family. What happens is that it does become more and more difficult for the party that maybe doesn't necessarily have the child. There creates, it seems like the other party that has the child creates this distance, and it's not even like it's not like a verbal thing. It's just something that they seem to create, by making the child, keeping the child very busy and active and creating a separate world for them, and they exclude the other partner. And
Yeah.
and that was one of the questions that I was approached to ask you tonight is what could that partner do, the one that's being excluded, to try to still remain in the child's life without, because so often it's so difficult to do that.
Yes, that's a very, very important question, and thank you for asking it. And first of all, I highly suggest whenever possible that parents choose co-parenting, shared parenting, parenting together rather than one parent having the children exclusively, unless there's a very good reason why both parents can't be equally in the children's life. I really suggest you consider that first because that leaves the least trauma for the children when they know that both mom and dad are there. The reason I think my son was able to cope so well is that he knew when he was with mom, he was with mom. When he was with dad, he was with dad. And we literally split the time because even though I was getting a divorce, my ex was a good father, and I knew my son loved him and that he was a good father, and so I didn't want to deprive him of having time with his dad. And I think if I had, my son would have been very angry at me, and it would have created a lot of problems. So first, I do suggest everyone try mediation and try resolving situations so that you can parent where both parents feel their part. If that's not the case and you have one parent who is at a distance, a physical distance, a geography, or is just not very much in the children's lives, then let's look at the technology. We have technology today that never existed before.
Correct.
And it's so much easier now for parents to be able to text children, to email children, to do video with and FaceTime and all kinds of things.
Yeah, they have Skype and everything.
Yes,
Yeah.
with Skype and all of that. There's so many ways of communicating. And what I suggest parents do is start creating routines. Like Monday night we have a call and we talk about the movies and the places we went over the weekend. And maybe Thursday evening we talk about sports games or things that we watched or other activities or dance class. You know, there's certain times when there's certain conversations with the other parents where you could share and you have questions or things that you get back to one another about, or you research things and then you discuss it at that time of that particular call. So you create interactivity. You collect things that you could bring for the visit, and maybe it's tickets to games or movie stubs or restaurant menus or things like that. There's ways of creating interactivity so that the children are part of the other parent's life, even if they're not physically seeing them as often, and that's very, very important. And you also want to be able to have the parent who does have primary custody encouraging the calls and making sure that you're calling Dad on his birthday and special occasions, or after the game. Be sure to call and about the game or share a video about something that just happened. So you can include that other parent in your lives. And that is not only responsible for the custodial parent to do, but it's really helpful for the child because the distance doesn't have to be there when you could literally be looking at each other on the screen and laughing and showing each other things. It really helps. So definitely keep that interaction. When parents alienate one child from the other parent, and sometimes it's in very subtle ways, and sometimes it's in very obvious ways. But whenever they do that, I believe they're being selfish. Mm-hmm. They're thinking of themselves, and they're thinking, well, I'm a better parent. That person isn't as worthy of the child, or they hurt me, and so why should they have the joy of having their child? Because the easiest way to punish another parent is through the children. And say there was an adultery, and the mother is furious about the adultery. Mm-hmm. Well, that doesn't mean that the husband is a bad father. It means he was a bad husband, and that's why you're getting a divorce. But it may be that your children still love their father, and you don't want to be talking about adultery to your children. It's not their place at their age to be hearing about that, even for teenagers. So you have to be very, very careful that you don't justify behavior that is only in your own best interest and that is really damaging and hurting your children because you're just not thinking about them. And so I suggest everyone put yourself in your child's shoes, see the world through their eyes, whether they're 6 or 16, and then make decisions based on that.
Wow, that's such important information. So where is your book available for our listeners if they wanted to pick up a copy of it?
Yes, thank you. Mm-hmm. How do I tell the kids about the divorce? Create a storybook guide to preparing your children with love is a unique way to tell the children about the divorce by creating a storybook in advance about you and your family. Uh-huh. I wrote the text, and you customize it. It's the fill-in-the-blank templates. So you download the ebook, you fill in the blanks with customizing about you and your family, and then you print the entire text out and put it into a photo album or a scrapbook and add family photos. So your children are reading through a book about them and their family. So they're very interested in it. And the gist of it is that life is going to go on. This is another chapter in our life, and yes, there's going to be a divorce, and that means basically that we're living in two different homes. But it doesn't mean it's the end of the family, and that's the key message to get across. We're still a family, and mom and dad will always be your mom and dad will always love you. And this is about change, not about blame. So we never talk to the kids about all the adult details. It's not their place. They can't understand it, and it's too much of a burden. It's hard enough for adults to cope with it all. So what you want to just say is that mom and dad believe that everyone will feel happier and more at peace if we're living in two separate homes. But you'll still be able to see mom and dad. You'll still be able to do things, and you'll have just two homes. You'll have toys in both homes. You'll have friends in both homes. And life will be okay because everyone will be happier without the tension that we've been experiencing now. And if you give it that kind of a perspective, the children will accept that and adapt to it much more easily because you're not making it seem like the end of the world. They're not frightened and afraid that life is ending. And you also, in the text, I have the key messages that every child needs to hear, and among them, very important, is you want to emphasize that this is not your fault in any way. Children very often blame themselves, and you want to remind them that when mom and dad are fighting, even if we're fighting about you, this is not your fault. This is mom and dad issues. And
Yeah,
you are
absolutely.
innocent.
That's very good.
Yeah,
Very good.
that's very good.
And then we have to talk about this is about change, not about blame. So even if you hate that ex of yours who did these horrendous things to you and destroyed your life, and that's why you're getting out of your marriage, regardless of what they did, if they're your child's parent and they're not an abusive parent, then you have to respect the fact that your children innately love both mom and dad. And if every time you say anything bad about the other parent, it hurts the child because the child is part of that parent.
Yeah, that's
so
very true.
bad-mouthing the other parent, no matter what you think of them, around your children, in front of your children, on the phone, anytime you do that, you're hurting your children. And it's like little scars. It's just like you're scarring them, and you're scarring them, and you're scarring them, and you're hurting them. They don't have the ability to communicate it and say it to you and tell you. But what happens is you damage their psyches, and they get depressed, or they act out, and they have behavior problems. They have issues. They are not able to cope with this because they're helpless.
Right. Absolutely.
And we have to understand that as parents. So it takes a mature adult parent to say, I'm going to move beyond and take the high road, even though I may dislike my ex. The biggest question to ask yourself is, do I love my children more than I hate my ex? Do I love my children more than I hate my ex? And if you could ask yourself that before you make any decision, it'll help you make a better decision, a smarter decision.
Yeah, I know.
And there's another question that's equally important. When you have a parenting decision, and you are co-parenting, if you happen to be involved and your ex is also involved in making decisions about health and education and certain major things that are happening in life, and when the question comes up, ask yourself, would I still make the same decision if we were still married? Or am I deciding differently because I want to get back at him? That's the difference. If you would be making the same decision if you were still married, then you're making a good parenting decision, and the two of you can be talking about it and deciding together as parents. But if you're making a decision and you're doing it because it's going to hurt your ex, then it may not be in the best interest of your children. And that's when parents get into trouble that does irrevocable damage to the children, and that's what we want to avoid.
Right. Now, that leads me to the second question that I was given. How do you keep the respect in the relationship that you have with your ex? I mean, when you're there's a lot of friction going on, there's a lot of problems going on, and the other party isn't being respectful. They're not honoring, keeping you aware of what's happening, making you part of the decisions. How do you how do you approach this without harming your kids? Because, you need to be a part of that, and your other party's
Absolutely.
not being respectful. So that was another question that was
Well,
approached to me.
that's another excellent question. These really are very vital questions. One thing I suggest is that everyone after divorce should have one of those online parenting scheduling programs. They're very inexpensive, like $10 a month for both parents to use. The one I like the best right now is a new one called kidsontime.com. And if you use those programs, it forces you to put everything on a schedule. So whatever decisions are being made about the littlest thing of who's picking Tommy up at is it 2 or 2:30 on Wednesday, from things about listing medications or when there's doctor's appointments or other important things, everything is put in and scheduled, and it sort of forces you to be upfront about things when you're making plans for vacation and how many days you're planning on taking and where you're going to be. Are you going to be at Grandma's house on Thursday or whatever is going on, so that the two of you are in the loop, and it teaches respect on one level because of that. Another important thing is the more you bend over backwards and do favors for one another, the more likely your partner, who may be a little more reticent, will do something in return. So it's going to always start with the more conscious parent. The one is more aware and more caring about the children. And what you need to do is always speak to your ex about the children, and not in ways that put them on the defensive. Everyone feels their rights. Everyone feels justified in how they're feeling. The situation in a divorce is when you speak to Mom, she's very justified in how she feels about that SOB. But when you speak to Dad, he's just as justified to his friends about her.
Right.
And so the reality is that we're all stuck in our own perception of the world, and we'll never be able to undo or change the other person's perception. But what we can do is talk to them respectfully, and we can be cooperative. When you're co-parenting month after month, year after year, or even if it's single parenting and you're not, you have full custody, whatever it is, if you have two parents involved, inevitably there are going to be times when one of you gets sick, an accident happens, something happens with work, and you can't always meet your schedules and your deadlines. Things change in life. People who are flexible have a much more flowing, easy relationship. So be flexible. When something happens and your ex calls up and says, listen, I just can't get there at 7:30, is it okay if I come at 9? Or can you switch this Thursday for next Thursday because such and such came up? If you bend over backwards and say, yes, sure, and I hope, in return, you'll let me do such and such for my birthday, then you're starting to have what's a cooperative relationship. You're starting to realize that this is a long-term relationship. You're going to be parenting your children for the rest of your lives, because you're parenting when they're in their 30s as well. It doesn't stop. But it's certainly, you have a good 20 years of serious parenting, and you have months and years ahead of you. So instead of creating friction and battling over everything, start letting things slide. Pick your battles. Say, okay, I wish he didn't take her to McDonald's, but there's worse things on earth. It's not happening 24 hours a day. Maybe I can make some suggestions on the online parenting things. I'd appreciate it if you did A, B, and C, and then in turn let him say, well, I'd appreciate it if you did E, F, and G. And then you could look at each other's requests. The more requests you honor from one another, the more likely you are to have a more flowing time and less tension. So that when big things come up that are worth battling about, they're not every other day. They may be once every other month or two, and then you could battle about things that are really urgent. But most of the times, it's better to cooperate, to flow, and to show that you're doing everything you can on behalf of the children. Use the language of we're still a family, and these are our children, and talk to each other as parents. You don't have to talk to each other as friends. You don't have to talk to each other as lovers. You're not married anymore. There's a multitude of relationship facets that are no longer part of your life. The only thing that attaches you are your children. But it's such a vital attachment. You want it to be as healthy as possible. And sometimes you need to, get counseling and therapy, and the blessings of Cece's group and all of that are so wonderful to get support from other people and get suggestions. But the less you put each other on the defensive, the less you accuse each other. If you learn communication skills, there are better ways of saying things. There are ways of being more respectful in your manner of approaching things. The more you do that, the more likely your partner on the other side will be able to be more amenable to you, and that'll start creating some positive win-win parenting experiences.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I tell you,
agree.
those are some excellent suggestions, Rose. I'm just floored. I didn't even know tools like that existed. I wish I would have had some things like that, because it makes so much sense that it would have been a good way to communicate. And I think the only thing that, when I was going through divorce, the only conversation I can remember that we had was I made it clear that I still was going to be a father. We may be getting divorced, but I'm still going to be the father, and I have my own role to play with him. And I remember we agreed that that would happen. So I didn't have animosity as far as being kept from the kids, but outside of that, those other tools that you mentioned would have made it so much easier. Because without those, you don't know if you're doing something and the other person thinks you're trying to antagonize them or not, because you bring them back an hour later.
Exactly.
You don't. It's everybody's thinking you're trying to do something where you're really not. So
Yeah, it really cleans things up a lot when you
yes,
take advantage of the online tools
yes.
like Kids on Time. Also, let me just say that it's very important to remember it's never too late to undo mistakes you made. We all made mistakes. And you may look back and say, gee, for the last 3 years, I've been saying the wrong thing to my kids about such and such.
Mm-hmm.
It's never too late to get your kids together and apologize and own up for things and say, I really shouldn't have decided to do such and such, and I'm sorry it hurt you guys, and I hope you can forgive me. What it teaches your children is that we're all human, we all make mistakes, and mature people own up to those mistakes and move on. You become a role model for them to realize that they can apologize for things, and they're watching you take the high road and be the best parent you can be. And that may be a lasting lesson for them. So never live in regret and say, oh, if only, because you could always apologize and own something and say, God, if I knew better, I would have done better, because that's the truth for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we're going to have to take a bit of a break now, but when
Right.
we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit more about and we'll spend a short amount of time, because I'd like to also go into the transition of when we want to start dating and stuff, what we can do to help our kids. But when we come back, I'd like to talk a little bit more about, what do you do when you have a toxic relationship with your ex, and how can you smooth those kind of things out, or what can you do to try to make it a little bit easier for the kids? And we have a few other questions that were proposed to me. So when we come back from our break, this is Going Solo, Life After Divorce, and I'm Cece, and I have with me
EZE.
right, and we have Rosalind on the phone with us. Rosalind, and she's going to help us out with a little bit more questions we have with regards to children. So stick around. We'll be right back.
The west central coast of Florida has an amazing music scene. Festivals, clubs, special performances, and there's always a lot of live music. The problem has always been getting the word out about events. Then GoTonight.com emerged on the scene. The brainstorm creation of founder Don McKeon, a Sarasota entrepreneur. We caught up with Don and his inspirational friend, Frank Papa, at the Flying Dog Cafe.
This is Frank. I'm Don. Frank is the reason that there is a GoTonight.com. He would call me repeatedly.
Where are we going? Where do you want to go? Where will we go tonight?
The website has been a boon to many small clubs. So next time you find yourself asking, where will we go tonight? You've got the answer.
Going solo, life after divorce. We have on the phone with us our guest this evening is Rosalind Sedacca, who is a well-known author and speaker on the affairs of divorce. And I tell you, Rosalind, I was telling Cece during the break that I've learned a lot myself. I just wish, it's now past the time. I fortunately was not in an adversarial relationship with my ex, and so it made it a whole lot easier. Both of us wanted to do what was right for the kids, and so I thank goodness, because had it been a different situation, I'd have probably made every mistake in the book, because I had no help. But fortunately, I was able to just be a good dad and continue on, and it served me well, I think. So,
Well, I tell you, I didn't know anything about this Kids on Time, and so I'm going to be checking out some of these things, and maybe we can share that with the divorce support group.
Right.
But I wanted to talk.
Matter of fact, there's a free 2-week trial period. I could send you a link, Cece,
Oh
to
yeah,
share
yeah, I would
with
love
your
that.
listeners, and they could check it out. It's very in depth. It's more advanced than some of the others. There's several out there, but this one offers financial sophistication, and also if you have a coach or a therapist or someone else who's part of a mediator who's part of the process, they get on for the same price, no extra cost. So, those professionals can look in and make sure that both parties are doing things properly, and it's really helpful. The goal is to reduce conflict.
Right.
And anything that reduces conflict is a real plus in my book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I tell you, anytime there's conflict, it always affects the kids. It just
Exactly.
doesn't. It just doesn't matter. It affects kids. We haven't given our call-in number, so let me give that real quick in case anybody out there listening and you want to call in and ask a few questions, maybe get some advice. Our call-in number is 813-235-0644. That's 813-235-0644. So if you want to call in, Rosalind can maybe answer your questions, and if you have any questions with regards to kids and such. But I wanted to touch a little bit about parental alienation. That seems to be a real hot topic right now. And I know some people that I've actually, have within the group, they are experiencing some of this. And they're getting like even one person that I know, they've been assigned, a guardian for the kids to make sure the kids, and needs and whatnot are being taken care of, and they have a counselor, and they have all of these different, factors of different people involved with regards to this, because there's so much, friction going on. But the reality is that when you are divorcing due to a toxic relationship, that unfortunately does not stop just because you're divorced.
Right.
The toxic relationship still seems to continue on with the kids. And so the question someone proposed to me is, how do you protect your kids from something like that? I mean, without making you look like a bad person all the time, how do you, I mean, we can only sugarcoat what the other person's doing so much that, how can we help these kids get through this?
Another very important question, and parental alienation is like the worst spectrum within the divorce world, because innocent children are being deprived of one parent because the other parent creates a toxic spell around them and tries to alienate them or physically keep them from their other parents. I'm a divorce and parenting coach, so I spend a lot of time talking to families about this. And again, sometimes we have to bring in legal resources when cases get complicated. But there are certain things that we have to be aware of not doing, and that is, one of them is turning our children into confidants. Very often we feel justified, and women especially, in confiding in our children and telling them all the terrible things about what their dad did. And very often it's done in an innocent way, but at the same time, it's a very destructive thing to do, because we're making our children feel bad about the other parent they love. And of course the opposite happens, because lots of women are being targeted and victimized as the bad parent. So we have to be very careful about looking at our children as friends or confidants or little adults that we could talk to. We need to vent to grown-ups. We need to see professional therapists. We need to go to support groups, but not use our children in any adult capacity. Same thing with having them spying on the other family. When children come home from one house and they're barraged with questions about every detail of what they ate and where they went and how they did it and what time this happened and who called there and all of that, children are so confused and they feel guilty in sharing information about the other parent, especially if one parent says, hey, don't tell Dad about this. And at the same time, they feel guilty if they're not answering questions from the parents. So it puts the children in an awful situation. We have to use these outside tools, these objective third-party tools as much as possible when we have a conflict and toxicity. Then having everything done on emails and scheduling calendars and messaging on an official site, it keeps the level of toxicity down, and it reduces the level of manipulation because you're accountable. Everyone, including legal resources, can see it. And so if you say you're going to do something at a certain time and then you don't do it, well, there's proof if it has to go to court after a while. So that's one resource, is just to have the accountability for everything so that you can say, well, I told her on the phone, and then it's your word against their word. And then you want to master your communication skills, because sometimes we are so used to the kind of fights we had in our marriage, we keep fueling those fights again and again years after the marriage. Some couples just like the drama and don't want to give it up, married or not. But there's no reason to have to do that. You want to treat your children's other parent respectfully as the other parent, and if you feel they're not fit to be a parent, then you do need to bring in legal resources to check that out and make decisions about whether your children should be spending time with the other parent. But if you're denying them contact with the parent because you hate them or you want to hurt them, then you're being abusive.
Right, absolutely. And something, too, I wanted to be able to express is that kids know what's going on. You know, we can make excuses and we can live our lives, you know, however we see fit. But the reality is our kids, they see it all. They know it all. They don't understand half of it, and they don't really know why they're going through it. But they do see that things are going on. So you don't necessarily have to say that your spouse is doing X, Y, Z, because your kids probably already know it. They already know what's going on. And what the reality is as those kids become adults, and thank goodness your son, you know, really, you guys set a very good example and were able to get through it, and he, you know, he seems very well adjusted. The whole reality is if there's a lot of these game playing things going on to hurt each other, the kids are going to know it, and they're going to be taking sides when they get older. They're going to be doing that kind of thing, and so it's going to end up, you might think if you're the one that's playing the games that it's not hurting you now, it will hurt you in the long run.
And that's a very important point. Thank you for making that point. Very, very, very true.
Yeah.
And it also moves on into when you're moving on and into dating after divorce and all the rest of that. Children are very sensitive, and they pick up on all the nuances. And there's new levels of complication when you're bringing another potential partner into the mix for children to digest, and that also is reflected in the relationship you have with your ex.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more. Let's talk about going into dating. Let's say you've moved on, you kind of healed, within the relationship, and you now want to go ahead and start dating. Do you have any tips for parents, what they can do to try to make that a little bit easier?
Oh, yes. First of all, you need to do the inner work to make sure you are clean and clear from the divorce, and you understand the dynamic, the part you played in the divorce. if you're still pointing fingers and blaming and saying this was 100% the fault of that SOB and I was just an innocent victim, then it's very likely you're going to create another situation very similar to learn that lesson over again. Too often we find people moving on into new relationships after a divorce without having done any of the inner work, and what happens is you find someone with another face but the same person again and again and again, no matter how many marriages you have. So you have to get rid of the baggage, you have to release it, you have to forgive yourself, you have to forgive your ex, and you have to be ready to really move on, let go of the past, understand the lessons that you learned from your past relationship, look at those lessons as a gift, and then say, okay, now how am I going to choose differently? What kind of partner do I really want in my life? And make a new list. And the list shouldn't be based on the height and the color of their eyes. It should be based on qualities, quality traits, character traits, values that you share, goals and beliefs and interests that you have in common. And when you find someone who shares enough of those, then they're more likely to be a good partner because they have the qualities that you're looking for, not just physically.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that'll be a much healthier relationship for you. Otherwise, we're all doomed to recreate the same old relationships again and again. That's why you find women who are with abusive men who find more abusive men. People who are married to gamblers or alcoholics will find another gambler or alcoholic. We all run patterns, and it takes some inner work. And that's the beauty of having support groups and counselors and coaches and therapists and people who can stop the pattern, point it out to you and say, wait a minute, why are you attracted to this same guy again? It looks like he's starting to treat you the same way.
That's the last one, right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can vouch for that myself. I know that I've been married, a couple times, and I can tell that my last marriage, 17-year marriage, is very similar to my first marriage, which was 10 years. So I can definitely see that. I mean, the things are a little bit different, of course, but definitely a very, at that time, a very toxic and terrible relationship. So patterns are very, very important, and then you do have to take responsibility of yourself and the part you played in it, because you did choose to be in that relationship.
Right.
Exactly.
So you have to understand why you chose that, and those type of things, why you allowed yourself to do some of the things that you did. Now, let me ask you about kids, though. What about kids and dating? Often people ask me, when do you introduce the kids? Do you introduce them right away? How do you, you're going out with several people. How do you, what the kids are going to see this? I mean, how do you?
This is very, very important. First of all, you should never apologize for having children. Children are part of the package that come with you. And you should never diminish their value because you want to find someone who's going to love and value and appreciate your children, or else you're starting out in a very toxic relationship to begin with. And then you don't want your life to be a revolving door for your children. So I suggest you only involve the kids when you're in some kind of a serious established relationship, when you think you're with someone who is a contender, someone who you're seriously considering being in a lasting relationship with. That's when you introduce the children, because if you're with another partner every 2 or 3 or 4 months, your children get very attached to these people. Some of them may be very nice. Suddenly they're out of their life. Someone else comes in and out of their life. They start feeling very insecure that who knows how long they'll be in your life. And it's much healthier to just wait. And then you have to also talk to your children so that they don't expect your new friend to replace dad. That's very frightening, unless you happen to have a very toxic dad that no longer belongs in the picture. But providing that's not the case, then your new partner can be a wonderful new partner, a new adult friend and supporter, but not someone who replaces dad. When someone comes in to replace dad, you start getting into heavy-duty emotional areas that are unfair. And so you want to reassure your children that no one's ever going to replace dad. And then you want to start doing kid-focused things together with the new partner and try it out for size and see how they like each other. And that's when you see whether this date who you're interested in and you feel romantic towards is also good with your friends. One word of caution is don't expect your new partner to be the disciplinarian to your children, even after you marry, because that's setting them up for a lose-lose situation. Children do not want to be disciplined by some stranger who comes into their life, unless you're dealing with very young kids who, are adapting. When they're under 5, it's different. But if you have a 9 or a 12-year-old, they don't suddenly want to have someone new disciplining them and telling them what to do. And you know what they're going to say. You're not my father. I don't have to listen to you. Mm-hmm. It's unfair to the new person. So I would make sure that only the biological parent does the disciplining and let the other one be a supporter and be there as an adult and as a parent, but it's different. And then also you want to listen to your children's feedback and respect it. You may not always like what you hear because your kids may not be in love with the same person you think you're in love with. But listen respectfully and try it on for size and put yourself in little Johnny's shoes and see how the world is, because sometimes they pick up on things that you may be blindsided by because you're so much in love or you're so wanting to have romance and sex in your life again, and you're oblivious to other personality traits. If you lecture your children or tell them how they should feel, they're going to shut up and stop communicating with you, and you've lost them. So you have to be more of a listener, have a dialogue going, and find out things. And if they say, he's okay, but I don't like such and such, then instead of saying, oh, that's silly, you should like that, listen and see if there's any validity in what they're saying, and then watch the relationship, because you could speak to your partner and say, my kids don't like the way you do such and such, and work on those things.
Right.
So it's definitely a process. It's a slow process, and it's communication. That's the most important thing in all of our relationships. And the way you communicate with your ex is also the way you're going to be treated in return with them. And they're going to feel uncomfortable when a new a parent figure comes into the picture. So you have to do that, slowly and respectfully, and remind them that no one is going to replace them in your children's life. Mm-hmm. If you show them that respect, they in turn will show that respect to you when they're finding another partner.
Right, absolutely.
Now, you had co-wrote a book, Date Women book, and is that the one that's available also for our listeners to try to pick up a copy of?
Yes, it's
the
99 things
right.
women wish they knew before dating after 40, 50, and yes, 60. Long title, but it's a very, very good book because it has all of this information. And I have something even better than just a book. I have a dating rescue 10-week e-course.
Oh, fantastic.
That gives people, for over 10 weeks, you get a section each week with exercises. So you get to read the content, and then you get to follow the exercises, and it's very personalized and individualized, and you really get a step-by-step process of how to move ahead in finding a real long-lasting love relationship, the one that I know all women are looking for.
Wow, that sounds wonderful.
And that's available at womendatingrescue.com.
Okay,
womendatingrescue.com. And then I have another dating kit that's available at womendatingafter40.com, 40, womendatingafter40.com. And I have a Create Your Ideal Relationship kit. So there's two options, just different forms. Some have ebooks and audios, and the other is a 10-week course. It just depends on the style that you prefer. But the information is all solid, proven information. I co-wrote it with a psychotherapist, and we've put together real information, not tips on how to flirt, because that's not going to get you any long-lasting relationship. We focus on what's really meaningful in finding a partner on a long-term basis, and that's what I know everyone is really looking for.
Yeah, we're looking for more depth, and that's what Going Solo is about, and Affairs of Your Heart is about. We're really looking for depth and to be able to change people's lives and that type of thing. So I really appreciate you doing this. Now, tell us one more. We're going to have to kind of wrap up the show here real quick. So tell us.
Can I tell you the two free ebooks I have?
Oh, yes, you may. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I have a free ebook on post-divorce parenting, which is available for free at childcentereddivorce.com. That's CENTERED, childcentereddivorce.com. Free ebook on post-divorce parenting. Just give me your email address and you'll automatically get it. And then I have a free ebook on answers to your most important questions on dating and relationships, and that's at womendatingafter40.com, 40. womendatingafter40.com, and just put in your email address, and that's available to you as well.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful.
Fantastic.
And then if someone wants to, because I know you do coaching and all of that, so if someone wants to reach you on coaching, how do they get a hold of you?
Just send an email to divorcepro@gmail.com.
Okay.
Divorcepro, P-R-O, @gmail.com, and just put coaching in the subject, and I'll send you information about that. Yes, I do telephone and Skype coaching all over the world.
Right. Now tell us, too, about your site that you have, the Divorce Center?
Childcentereddivorce.com, yes.
Yeah.
At that site, I have articles and a free weekly e-zine. I have a blog and tons of valuable resources, the resources that you could count on when you're looking for mediators or good guy attorneys or therapists or all the people who are child-centered. And I have, the websites, the books, all the resources, and audio interviews and videos. So there's just tons of information, everything designed to help people get through divorce and beyond in the most positive way.
Absolutely. Your site is marvelous. It's absolutely marvelous.
I was very impressed with it. A lot of information.
That's why I wanted to have you on the show, because I think you are just a stand-up lady, and I appreciate all that you do to help other people. And your sites are very worthwhile having a look at, and so I do highly recommend it. So we'll definitely put that information out on Going Solo Facebook page. So if anyone hasn't joined the Facebook page, join it. It's Going Solo, Life After Divorce. I think it's called Going Solo Radio, Life After Divorce. We also have our own site up now, which is pretty exciting. We have, it's www.goingsoloradio.com, and we have, information on there. So you go ahead and go, and it tells you like the upcoming shows that are going to be on, and you can click right through to the station itself and listen to live if you want. It tells a little bit about EZE and myself and what we're trying to do and accomplish with this show. And it also gives many thanks to the divorce support group who have actually inspired this show today. So we're very, very pleased. So any other, just a second or two, Rosalind, anything you want to just share as a goodbye before we have to say?
Yes, I wanted to share another important question to ask yourself in any process before, during, or after a divorce, and that is, what will my children say to me when they're grown about the way I handled the divorce? Will they understand? Will they thank me for putting their best interests first? Or will they be angry about the decisions I made? If you ask yourself that before any decision that you make, you're going to be on sounder footing and make better decisions, and they'll thank you when they're grown up.
Oh, marvelous. That was a marvelous way to end the show.
It really is.
Yes, thank you so very much for being on the show with us today.
It's been a pleasure. I totally support the wonderful work you guys are doing.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure meeting you. I really appreciate it a lot. I can't wait to tell other people about a lot of things that you mentioned tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we'll sign off for you today. So thank you so much for joining the show.
It's been a pleasure.
Okay,
Yes.
bye-bye.
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 Well, I tell you, EZE, it really creates. You have to have a lot of strength sometime to be able to get through, and I think
Yeah.
you've experienced that in yourself with your children going through divorce and then raising them as a single father and everything, putting their needs and wants first.
Right.
And sometimes it just really takes sometimes more strength than you really think you have. So you just have to kind of gut it up, make it happen, and keep your kids in the forefront. Because I've met your daughter,
Yeah.
and she's a beautiful lady, just absolutely
Well,
beautiful.
it's when we have people on like Rosalind, I look and I say to myself, it's so much a better world in that. Like when I was divorced, I didn't know tools, I didn't know therapists. I knew you went to counseling, maybe in marriage counseling. That was about it. And now, I mean, you've got people like Rosalind that can Skype with you in your home and do counseling and consulting. There are so many tools available for those that really care about doing it the right way. I'm just astonished.
Right.
That,
And then giving the support, like, of course, you can reach me on meetup.com,
Yeah.
which is My Friends Connect Divorce Support Group. We have, I think, close to 400 people in the group now. We meet the first Friday of every month, which is coming right up, and the first Friday of every month at Champs International, right here in Tampa Bay area, International Mall. And that is 6:30 every Friday, first Friday of every month. And just some great people helping each other. We do what they call a pay it forward, and everybody steps in and tries to help out each other, and it's just a great bonding way of being able to get through some of the very tough times in your life. So
yeah.
we've got some really cool things happening. We're going to have. I wanted to let everyone know we're going to have Stan Givens. He's going to be coming on the show soon.
Oh, okay.
We're going to be talking about, he's an attorney here in the Tampa Bay area from very large law firms, Givens and Givens, wonderful man.
Wow, okay.
And he's been on the show before. Going solo was really fabulous. But, there's a lot of new laws, new things happening with the alimony issues. And so
okay.
he's going to come on, share some of those things with the audience. So that's going to be exciting. We also have Connie coming on. Connie's coming the end of this month.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
yeah. And so if you want to know what your future's going to
Right.
hold.
And I do want to know.
Yes, me too. And so she's going to be able to share some of those things with you. So that's the very last show of the month. So we've got some really kind of fun things happening on Affairs of Your Heart. You want to make sure you tune in
Right.
on that.
Tuesdays at 7 o'clock, 7, 8 o'clock on the same station, liveandloveradio.com.
Absolutely. We've got this Tuesday an interactive show.
Yes.
So we're going to have people come on, talk a little bit about some of their dating situations, woes, and try to inspire them and
Right.
get some things happening for some people out there. So we got a lot of really cool things in the works, which are surprises, which are going to launch soon.
Yep, we do.
So, yeah,
We do. So,
yeah.
but especially stay tuned next Tuesday for Affairs of Your Heart. We're going to kind of make it lively and enjoyable for everyone. So,
Absolutely. That's going to be fun. That truly is a very fun show.
Yeah.
So, and that's talking about dating and relationships. And so that's what we want to do as we move through going solo life after divorce. We want to move through and really have a life for ourselves. So, and I think that show is really going to be a fabulous show to help others. So, well,
All right.
we're going to have to sign off.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So this is EZE,
And this is Cece.
and this is Going Solo, Life After Divorce. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.